Picture a glass of milk, cold, white, fresh from the cart. Now picture what's actually in it. Not cream from a pastoral meadow, not some gentle Jersey cow standing knee-deep in morning clover, philosophically content with her existence. Picture a cow that has never seen grass. A cow that lives in a basement 10 feet underground, ankle deep in her own filth, fed the hot, steaming waste mash from a whiskey distillery next door. Picture her ribs showing through her hide. Picture her udders raw and weeping. Picture the milk she gives coming out blue-grey and thin, the colour of watered-down sky, nothing like the rich white liquid you think you're buying. Now add a quart of water per gallon. Stir in a handful of chalk powder to make it white again. Toss in a splash of molasses to give it colour. If you're feeling generous, add a spoonful of calf's brain. Yes, actual calf's brain, obtained cheaply from the slaughterhouses on the west side, to give it that creamy richness a good milk should have but doesn't. Pour it into a tin can that hasn't been properly cleaned in 3 days. Load that can onto a cart. Drive that cart through New York City streets in July. Sell it to a tenement mother for 4 cents a quart. She'll give it to her baby. That's 1880. That's what fresh milk meant. A city where you could conduct a financial transaction on Wall Street in the morning and watch a child die of that same transaction by August. A place where 200,000 dairy cows across the region were producing something called milk, and where a significant portion of what ended up in the tin cans and ceramic jugs of the Lower East Side bore only a theoretical relationship to what had come out of those cows. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists peering through glass at a sanitized exhibit. We're living it. One day, one route. One boy moving through a city that is quietly poisoning its youngest residents and calling it commerce. So, I make these history for sleep stories, and I genuinely have no idea if you're listening because history is comforting, or because you're the kind of person who finds Victorian-era public health catastrophe relaxing. I'm not going to judge you either way. You do what you need to do. Get comfortable. The milk is cold, relatively speaking. Here we go. Your eyes open at 3 a.m, not because an alarm woke you, not because sunlight found the window. There is no sunlight at 3 a.m. in July or any other month. Your eyes open because your body knows. After 6 months of this route, your body has simply stopped needing to be told. 3 a.m, every morning. The body keeps its own accounts. The room around you is the exact dimensions of a coffin that someone has decided to call an apartment. 3rd floor of a tenement on Mulberry Street, in the part of Lower Manhattan that the newspapers sometimes call the 6th Ward, and sometimes call 5 Points, and always call, in their quieter editorials, a place they'd rather not think about too carefully. You share this room with 2 other men. Connolly, who works nights at a tannery in Brooklyn, and comes home in the small hours smelling like something that died specifically to haunt him. The smell is not simple. It's acid and organic matter and something chemical underneath that. The particular perfume of leather making that the industry has never found a way to make pleasant, and has long since stopped trying. And a man everyone calls Poles, whose actual name you've never learned, who works a coal delivery wagon and sleeps so deeply that an explosion would probably not move him. Poles arrived in this room 6 weeks before you did, and has, in that time, communicated with you through exactly 4 exchanges. You respect this. Poles is snoring now. The sound he makes is less like breathing, and more like a large piece of furniture being dragged across wet floorboards. You've learned to sleep through it. Mostly, you sit up. The straw tick mattress crackles under you, and in the dark the sound feels too loud. The floorboards are cold under your bare feet. Not the pleasant cool of a summer morning, but the deep cold of wood that has never quite dried out, that has absorbed a decade of damp from the building above and below and on either side of it. Your name is Thomas Brennan. You're 17 years old. You arrived in New York from County Cork 14 months ago, with 32 cents and a sister's address on a piece of folded paper, and the address turned out to be wrong, and the 32 cents bought you one meal and nothing beyond it, and the city received you the way it receives everyone who arrives with nothing. It held out its hand, then it closed its fist. But that was 14 months ago. You have work now. You have this room. You have the root. The smell of the room hits you the moment you're fully awake. It's a layered smell, and you've learned to read it the way a navigator reads weather. Top layer, the tannery smell coming off Connolly's coat, which hangs near the door. Something organic and chemical simultaneously. Skin and acid. The smell of transformation, of animal matter becoming something else. Below that, coal dust from poles, now permanent, ground into the very wood of the floor where he walks, impossible to separate from the building itself. Below that, the building. The hundreds of people packed into 6 floors above you and below you, and on either side of you. Cooking and sleeping and existing in spaces not designed for this density. Cabbages boiling somewhere. A coal fire barely maintained. Children sleeping in shifts. And underneath all of it, underneath everything, like the foundation stone of the whole smell, the street outside. 3 a.m, and Mulberry Street already has a smell. Garbage and horse manure and the faint chemical tinge of the dye house 2 blocks over, and something sweet and rotten that you've never been able to identify, but that is simply always there, always present, always underneath everything else, like a long low note no one talks about. This is home. You pull on your clothes in the dark. No candle. You learned not to waste them. Your hands know where everything is without needing to see. The rough linen shirt worn thin at both elbows, soft now from repeated washing in cold water. The heavy canvas trousers that used to belong to someone larger, gathered at the waist with a length of rope. The boots left by the door, stiff with cold and old water stains that have left white rings around the toes like tide marks. You tie the boots without sitting down, because sitting on the floor means touching Connolly's things, and Connolly is particular about his things despite the fact that his things are uniformly terrible. Your coat is last. Heavy brown wool, missing the second button from the top. You found it on a Canal Street second-hand cart and paid 15 cents for it, which was a significant portion of your weekly wages, and which you have never once regretted. New York winters are not Irish winters. Irish winters are cold and wet and miserable in a familiar way. The cold of rain and stone and persistent damp. New York winters are cold in a way that feels personal, like the city has looked at you specifically and decided you need to understand something. But it's July now, and the coat is not for warmth. The cans are cold even in summer. They sit in ice overnight, and after 2 hours of carrying them, the cold works through your shirt and settles into your chest like a slow, patient illness. You pull the door closed quietly behind you. The tenement staircase smells different from the room, more concentrated, more human. 40 families in this building. 40 sets of smells, all of them seeping under doors and through walls and rising up the stairwell to mingle in the dark. Someone on the second floor is already awake. The thin yellow line of candlelight under their door. A woman's voice, low and rhythmic, probably singing to a baby. There are always babies in this building. There are always more babies being born than there are people moving out. The building slowly pressurizing with new life. The stairs creak under your boots. Every step a different pitch, a different complaint. You know them all now. Second step from the top, a high sound, almost musical. The land in between first and second floor. A bass groan that seems to come from the whole building at once, the sound of weight borne for a long time. At the street door, you stop for a moment, push it open, and Manhattan at 3 a.m. hits you in the face, still summer warm outside. The heat that baked the cobblestones all day hasn't fully released yet. It rises from the stones in waves you can feel if you hold your hand near the ground. But there's a breeze tonight coming off the East River 5 blocks away, carrying with it the smell of the river, mud and fish and brine, and the particular sweetness of decay that a living waterway produces in summer. You breathe it in, it's cleaner than the staircase. Mulberry Street at 3 is not empty, it's never empty. Night shift workers moving toward factories and dockyards. A bakery 2 doors down with light already blazing in the windows and the smell of bread. Real bread. The best smell in this city at any hour. Drifting through the opened upper window like a promise you can't quite afford. And at the end of the block, turning the corner, the milk cart. You can hear it before you see it. The specific sound of iron wheels on cobblestone, and underneath that the rhythmic clank of tin cans jostling against each other, and underneath that the slow, patient clip-clop of a horse that has done this route so many times it no longer requires direction. The horse is named Caesar, which is the most dignified thing about him. He's a grey gelding, maybe 12 years old, with hips that show through his coat in 2 rounded knobs, and a way of walking that suggests everything hurts slightly, but is being borne with stoic professionalism. His eyes are calm, his movements are deliberate. He knows exactly where he's going, and is prepared to take exactly as long as it takes to get there, and not 1 moment less. You've worked with Caesar for 6 months. You understand each other, not in any sentimental way. Caesar is a working animal, and you are a working human, and the relationship is one of mutual professional respect. But you have learned each other's habits. The cart pulls up, and there is Maguire. Patrick Maguire is your senior man on the route. He's 31 years old and has been driving milk carts in New York since he was 15, and this 16-year span of service has done to his body approximately what you'd expect from 16 years of lifting heavy tin cans in all weather before the sun rises. His hands are enormous, the kind of hands that develop when you spend years gripping can handles in the dark, when the muscles of the forearm build and build until the grip becomes the strongest thing about you. His fingers are permanently bent slightly inward, curved around the phantom shape of a handle, even when his hands are empty. You've watched him sit at the depot with his hands in his lap, and noticed how they never quite flatten, never quite relax. They hold the ghost of the work even when the work is done. His face is weathered in the specific way that comes from spending every morning before sunrise in whatever temperature the city provides. The skin of his cheeks is reddened and rough, like brick that's been rained on and dried thousands of times. Deep lines round his eyes from squinting into lamplight and pre-dawn dark. A moustache that he maintains with considerably more care than he brings to anything else in his life. Trimmed precisely, the one concession to vanity in an otherwise entirely utilitarian existence. He has strong opinions about milk, not about what's in it, but about the logistics of its delivery, the order of the stops, the optimal approach to each building, the customers who tip. There are 3 of them on this route, and Maguire has their building and floor numbers memorised, and the customers who will stand in their doorways for 10 minutes discussing their ailments while your cans get warm and your route falls behind schedule. Thomas, he says, when you climb up onto the cart beside him. Maguire. Caesar doesn't acknowledge your arrival. He's looking down the street with the focused patience of an animal that has made a permanent peace with its purpose and is simply waiting for the humans to stop fussing. Busy morning, Maguire says. This is what he says every morning. You've come to understand that it's not a statement about the morning specifically, but a philosophy of life in general. Everything is busy. The morning is always busy. The appropriate response is to get on the cart and go. The cart moves. You're carrying 30 cans tonight. Each can holds 10 quarts of milk. That's 300 quarts for this route, which covers 6 blocks of the Lower East Side in a specific order that Maguire has optimised over years and guards with something approaching military secrecy. The route exists in his head as a precisely engineered sequence, each stop flowing into the next with minimal backtracking, each building approach from the angle that requires the fewest steps. The cans are heavy. Full, a 10-quart tin can weighs somewhere around 22 pounds plus the weight of the can itself. You'll carry each one up at least 1 flight of stairs, in most cases 2 or 3, and in the case of old Mrs. Petrovska on Orchard Street, 4 flights, because she is 90 years old and buys a quart of milk every morning and has never in 6 months offered you anything for your trouble. And when you mentioned this to Maguire, he said, "She's 90 years old, Thomas. What do you want her to give you?" And you had no real answer to that. The cans are cold from the ice house. You packed them yourself yesterday evening, lifting them into the ice straw beds in the depot's storage room, the blocks of ice already sweating in the July heat, the straw insulation fighting a losing battle with summer. The storage room was probably 50 degrees if you were being generous, which on a hot July day is not generous enough. By noon, if the day heats up, and it will, the temperature in those cans will be closer to 60, maybe 65, in a heat wave, higher. But that's a noon problem. Right now, the cans are cold enough that when you grip the handle, the metal bites into your palm and your fingers begin to go numb within a minute. You've learned to shift your grip every 30 seconds to redistribute the pressure before the numbness becomes the kind that's hard to reverse. This is something your hands have learned to do without consulting your mind. Under your left arm, the empties for the return, lighter but awkward. They bang against your hip with every step, a rhythmic reminder of the morning's progress. In your coat pocket, a cloth-wrapped piece of bread from the Delancey bakery packed last night, already slightly stale. By mid-morning it will be very stale. You'll eat it anyway, standing up somewhere leaning against a wall between stops. And in your other pocket the tin cup with the long handle, the dipper. Every customer gets their milk measured out with the dipper. You pour from the large can into their own container, counting the ladles, watching the level, making sure the quantity is right. The dipper is important. We'll come back to the dipper. Before the route, there's the depot. You reach it at 3:20 on a side street off Centre Street, wedged between a coal yard and a building whose purpose you've never been certain of. but which always has men going in and out at odd hours in a manner that suggests it would prefer not to be discussed. The depot is run by Thomas Sullivan, Mr. Sullivan to your face, Sully to everyone else. He is 44 years old and has the build of a man who used to do physical work and now supervises it, which means broad shoulders with a softness around the middle that his grey vest tries and fails to disguise. He wears the same grey vest every day. You have begun, in quiet moments, to wonder if he sleeps in it. The depot in the early morning is its own complete world. 6 carts get loaded here, you and Maguire. The Kowalski brothers with their 2-cart operation, moving efficiently in the way of siblings who've been working together long enough to need no words. A wiry man named Delbert who is so consistently cheerful at 4 in the morning that you find it slightly unsettling, like a dog who hasn't learned that something should disturb you, and a partnership of 2 older men, Carroll and Finch, who have been doing this route since before the Civil War, and whose coordinated movements are so precisely synchronized that watching them work is like watching a mechanism. The depot smells like milk, obviously, but not the clean smell of milk from a healthy animal in fresh air. The smell of milk that has been present in large quantities in an enclosed space for years, a space that can never quite be cleaned all the way because it is always full and always in use. There's a sweetness to it that's almost pleasant, and then underneath the sweetness something else. Something that catches in the back of your throat. Something that is the smell of milk adjacent to not being milk anymore. You've learned not to think about it. The cans come in the night before, loaded off the larger delivery wagon from the country, or what passes for the country in this context, which in some cases means farms in New Jersey or Westchester, and in other cases means something else entirely. Something much closer. Something that uses the word country in the same way certain establishments use the word fresh. The cans are lined up along the back wall packed in straw, and sawdust beds around blocks of ice that the icemen deliver each evening. The ice comes from the Hudson River, cut in winter, stored in the massive ice houses along the waterfront, delivered by wagon to depots and homes across the city. In July, you go through more ice than in any other month. In July, you also go through more milk. People are thirsty in July. Babies need feeding in July. July is the month you will come to understand when everything that is wrong with this system becomes most visible. But that comes later. Right now, you're loading cans in lamplight while Sully moves between the carts with his clipboard and vest, checking counts, calling out route adjustments. Brennan, you're taking the orchard block today. Maguire's got the Hester extension. Orchard block means Mrs. Petrovska and 4 flights of stairs. Yes, sir. And there's 2 new families at number 42, 3 quarts between them. The wife will be at the door. Yes, sir. Sully pauses, looks at you with an expression you can't quite read. You break any cans? No, sir. Good. Last week Delbert broke 2. He moves away. You lift the first can into position. 22 pounds. Your back knows the weight the way a familiar road knows a cartwheel. The groove is there, the memory of thousands of repetitions. Your shoulders know it. The muscles along your upper back have, in 6 months, developed into something your mother in Cork would not recognize on the body that used to belong to her son. You're stronger than you've ever been in your life. You're also more tired than you've ever been in your life. But there's no useful meditation on that at 3 in the morning with 30 cans to load. Here is something you knew by the end of your first week on this route. The milk in those cans has been watered. Not all of it. Maybe not even most of it, but some of it, enough of it. You know this the way you know most things in this city, not because anyone told you, but because you watched and listened and added things together. You know it because of the colour. Good milk, real milk, from a healthy cow on a decent farm with clean grass, is not pure white. It's cream-coloured, slightly yellowish, rich-looking. The milk you're carrying is whiter than that, whiter than it should be. A clinical white, the white of something corrected. You know it because of the weight. A full 10-quart can of whole milk should feel a certain way when you tip it, should have a density to it, a resistance. The milk in some of these cans tips too easily, moves too freely, and you know it because 3 months into the route, you were in the back of the depot when Sully's helper, a young man named Egan, didn't realise you were there. And you watched Egan take a bucket of water from the pump in the yard and pour it, slowly and carefully, into one of the large receiving cans. Egan saw you watching. There was a moment. Then Egan went back to what he was doing, and you went back to loading. And neither of you has ever mentioned it. This is how it works. This is how a lot of things work in New York in 1880. The knowledge is distributed but unspoken, like a tax that everyone pays without quite acknowledging the payment. You're not the only one who knows. Maguire knows. Of course Maguire knows. Maguire has been doing this for 16 years, and Maguire doesn't say anything either, and you've watched his face carefully on mornings when you're both loading cans, looking for something like shame or conflict. What you find instead is the face of a man who has made his peace with the situation, and is focused on the logistics of the day. The milk is watered. The chalk makes it white again. The customers don't know. And if they did know, if you told them, what would happen? They'd buy from the next cart, which is almost certainly doing the same thing. This is what you tell yourself. You finish loading the cans. The route begins at 4 o'clock, when the city is at its most between states. Not the dead hours of 2 or 3, when even the night shift workers are settled in, and the street noise has dropped to almost nothing. Not the first light of 5 or 6 when the day shift begins and the bakers and laundry women and pushcart operators start their own particular urgency. 4 in the morning is a hinge. The old darkness not finished, the new day not yet begun. The city in the gap between one thing and the next. Caesar moves at a walk because there's no reason to hurry, and because Caesar has made a life's philosophy of efficient effort. Trotting when a walk will do is not efficient. Caesar has made this calculation many thousands of times and always arrives at the same answer. The cartwheels on cobblestone make their specific sound. Rattle and roll. Iron on stone. Underneath that, the cans shifting and settling, the sound of a milk cart that any resident of this neighbourhood has been hearing since birth, and will continue hearing until the neighbourhood changes and they move away, and remember it in old age as one of the sounds of home, a sound so ordinary it became invisible until it was gone. The streets are lit by gas lamps on the main thoroughfares and dark in the side alleys. The lamps throw pools of orange-yellow light that don't quite overlap, so you move through alternating light and dark as the cart progresses, in and out of visibility like a ship navigating channels. Mulberry Street. This street contains more people per acre than anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere, or close to it. This is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. It is documented. The tenements are packed 4 and 5 families to a floor. The basements hold families the upper floors don't know about. The stables have been converted. The alleys between buildings have shacks pressed against the walls, covered with oilcloth. People sleep in every vertical foot of these buildings, and when they wake, when the babies wake, which they do at all hours, some of them need milk. That's why you're here. You pull the cart to the first stop. Number 11 is a 6-story brick building where the door is already unlocked at this hour because the super, a man named Gratz, unlocks it at 3:30 to let the various early shift workers out, and hasn't gotten around to implementing the specific locking schedule the landlord has been requesting for months. The stairwell of number 11 smells like boiled cabbage and coal smoke and damp plaster, and a third smell that is simply the accumulated smell of humans close together over time. Not an unpleasant smell exactly. It's too familiar for that, but a dense one. The smell of a building that holds many lives. You shoulder the first can, 2 quarts for the Riley family on the second floor, and go up, your boots on the wooden stairs. A creak at each step, some high and some low, the building's own language. Through the door of apartment 2B, a baby crying. The low continuous sound of infant unhappiness, not distress, just the ordinary complaint of a small person who has an opinion about being awake at this hour. A woman's voice responding, low and rhythmic. The sound of a mother who has been doing this long enough to do it without fully waking up herself. Mrs. Riley is waiting at her door before you knock. She must have heard the cart in the street below. She opens the door, and in the lamplight from her apartment she's a woman, maybe 35 years old, who looks older, as everyone in this neighbourhood looks older than they are. Irish, from the west, Galway or Clare, from the way she shapes her words. Her hair is down, not yet put up for the day, and in the yellow lamplight it's the colour of old hay. She holds out her jug. 2 quarts. You open the can. The smell of the milk rises up in the enclosed stairwell, that slightly warm animal smell, even when the milk is cold, the smell of dairy that has been present in your clothes and hands for 6 months until you barely notice it anymore. You dip the long-handled cup into the can, once, twice, 3 times for the first quart, 3 more for the second. 8 cents change hands. Will it keep? She asks. She asks this a lot. In a cool place, you say. I've nowhere cool. The street is cooler than my kitchen. There's nothing you can say to this that would be useful or true. Morning, Mrs. Riley. Morning, Thomas. You go back down. Second stop. The Moravec family on the 3rd floor. 4 quarts. Mrs. Moravec doesn't come to the door. She leaves her jug in the hallway with a folded note over the handle. This means she trusts you. Or she's too tired to stand at a door at 4 in the morning with a full building of children to mind. Both seem reasonable. You fill the jug, take the note, which is the same note every morning. 4 quarts. Thank you in careful handwriting. You fold it back over the handle. 3rd floor. A family whose name you don't know yet. They moved in 2 weeks ago. Big family, 6 or 7 children, and the father comes to the door in his undershirt with the look of a man who has been awake since midnight with a teething baby. 6 quarts, he says. While you're measuring, the baby in the room behind him makes a sound that is not quite crying. Something lower, more sustained, more worrying in its consistency. She's all right, the man says, though you didn't ask. Summer heat gets to them. Yes, sir. 24 cents. He counts them out of a ceramic dish on the windowsill beside the door, the dish kept there specifically for this purpose, the coins laid out the night before. You don't look into the apartment. You've learned not to look into apartments unless you're invited. It's not just politeness. It's that you have 30 cans on the cart and 40 more stops to make. And looking too closely at the lives behind these doors takes something from you that you don't have to spare on a 40-stop morning. You go back to the cart. Caesar turns his head slightly at your approach and then looks away, satisfied that you are where you should be. By 4:30 the route is in rhythm and the streets have begun their slow awakening. The bakery on Delancey is fully blazing. You pass it on a block-long stretch between stops, and the heat from its windows hits your face like a soft hand in the dark. And the smell of bread in the pre-dawn is something that no daily exposure can dull. It speaks to something old in the body. Warmth, food, safety, the oldest promises. The bread costs 3 cents a loaf. You buy it when you can. Other carts are moving. Newspaper delivery boys on fast ponies. The papers rolled and flying from their hands into doorways with practiced accuracy. Ice wagons, huge and lumbering, their drivers wrapped in rough canvas because the ice they're handling will soak through ordinary clothing in 20 minutes, and other milk carts. Devlin's outfit from 2 blocks over. His horses are better fed, his cans are better maintained, and his milk is, from what you've heard, slightly less aggressively watered than Sully's. But Devlin's milk costs 5 cents a quart instead of 4. On Mulberry Street and Orchard Street, 1 penny per quart makes a real difference. People buy from Sully because 4 cents is what they can manage. You think about this sometimes, the mathematics of the situation. The families buying from Sully are buying from Sully because 4 cents is what they have. And because they're buying from Sully, they're getting the milk that Egan diluted. And because they're getting diluted milk, their babies are getting less nutrition than their mothers believe. And because the milk has travelled in imperfectly cleaned cans and sat in insufficient ice and moved through warm summer streets. But you stop that thought. You stop it because you're on the 5th stop of a 40-stop route, and stopping a thought midway is something you've gotten very good at in 14 months in this city. The city teaches you this. It teaches you the efficiency of not finishing certain thoughts. You pick up the can, you go up the stairs. Sully said 2 new families at number 42, 3 quarts between them, the wife at the door. Number 42 is on Orchard Street, a narrow building squeezed between a tailor's shop and a basement synagogue, with a front stoop that's crumbling at one corner and a first-floor window that's been covered with oilcloth for as long as you can remember. The wife at the door is young. Younger than you expected, maybe 20, maybe 21. Dark hair pinned in a hurry, a baby on her hip that is awake and looking at you with the focused, slightly suspicious attention that babies of a certain age give to strangers, as if they're conducting an assessment and reserving their verdict. The baby's probably 9 or 10 months old, fat and healthy looking, which in this neighbourhood is not guaranteed. "You have the milk?" she says. Her English is careful, learned, not born. "Yes, ma'am. 3 quarts. 2 for me, 1 for Mrs. Landau across the hall." She holds out her jug. You fill it. The baby watches the milk going in with an expression that is almost professional in its assessment. "Is it fresh?" she asks. The question lands on you the way it always lands, not like a challenge, but like a small weight placed carefully on an old bruise. "Yes, ma'am. Came in from the country last night." This is what you say. This is what Maguire told you to say on your 2nd day. Came in from the country last night is technically true in some cases. The country it came from may be New Jersey, or it may be a distillery cellar on West 17th Street. "She drinks so much," the young mother says, looking at the baby on her hip. "I try to nurse, but there isn't enough. She needs the milk." The baby turns from the jug to look at you again. Is it good? The young mother asks again, quietly, like she's asking something she isn't sure she wants answered. There is a moment here, a small, specific moment. You can feel it the way you feel a change in weather before it fully arrives. Keep it in the coolest place you have, you say. Use it today. Don't keep it overnight. She looks at you. That's what you'd say about any milk in summer, she says slowly. Yes, ma'am. She takes her jug, hands you the coins for Mrs. Landau. You go across the hall. Mrs. Landau is 60-something, with the manner of a woman who has outlasted everything she expected to outlast, and is mildly annoyed to still be here dealing with it all. She takes her quart without ceremony. You're the new boy, she says. This is what she's called you for 6 months. Yes, ma'am. The last boy broke a can on my landing. I'll be careful. The boy before him was a thief. I'm not a thief. She looks at you with the focused skepticism of a woman who has been in this city for 30 years and has heard many assurances from many young men. We'll see, she says. She closes the door. You go back to the stairs. By 6 a.m, you've made 20 stops, and your back is conducting its own kind of accounting. The specific pain is not in the muscles. Your muscles are long past complaining about this level of work. The pain is in a place between your shoulder blades, a grinding sensation that comes from carrying a heavy weight on one side of your body for 2 hours. You switch sides when you can. The design of the cans and the layouts of the stairwells make some switches impossible. Your hands are cold. Not from cold air. The July air is warming now, the temperature climbing toward what will probably be an unpleasant afternoon, but from the cold of the metal and the pressure of the handle. You flex your fingers. The movement is stiff. The skin across the knuckles is cracked at 2 points, the same cracks that opened in winter and haven't healed since, that split a little further each time you close your hands against cold metal. You've wrapped them with cloth on bad mornings. Today is not yet bad enough. The sun is fully up over the eastern rooftops, the first real light turning the tops of the buildings gold orange while the street below remains in shadow. In this light, New York looks like a painting someone made of a city that could be beautiful. 20 minutes ago, at street level, you passed a dead horse in the gutter on Delancey. It had been there since at least yesterday, the smell told you that. No one had moved it yet. The rendering carts come through, but not on a schedule you can predict. The city at eye level and the city at rooftop level are 2 different cities. You've been living at eye level long enough to stop looking up. You should know, before we go further, where this milk actually comes from. Not the comfortable version, the real story. 3 weeks into your route, on a slow Thursday afternoon when the morning deliveries were done early and Sully had nothing else for you, Maguire said, "You should see it. Every man on this route should see it once." You took the streetcar uptown to the west side to a neighbourhood that is mostly industrial. Factories, warehouses, the western edge of the city where things get made and processed and transformed. The distillery was on West 16th Street. It made whiskey, or the early stages of whiskey, the grain mash that is the first step in the process. The mash is cooked, the alcohol extracted, and what's left is a hot, sodden, sweet-smelling waste product, spent grain. The spent grain, still warm, still nominally nutritious in a basic way, has to go somewhere. It goes to the cows. The dairy was attached to the distillery. Not next door. Actually attached. connected by a trough system through the wall so the spent grain could flow directly from production to feeding without ever going outside. 200 cows, kept in stalls underground, in a basement that ran the length of the building. You went down the stairs. The smell hit you first. Not the smell of a barnyard. You know barnyards. You grew up near. Enough of them. And a barnyard has manure, yes, but also hay and mud and the particular clean smell of animal coats and the air that moves freely because there are openings, because there is an outside to connect to. This had no outside. The ceiling was low, maybe 7 feet. The stalls were narrow, each barely wide enough for a cow to stand without touching both walls. 200 cows in a space the size of a church, in a basement with no windows and 2 ventilation shafts that were clearly insufficient. The smell was ammonia and manure and rotting grain and something else underneath all of it. A sweetness that was not the sweetness of health, but of disease, of organic processes that are supposed to be internal becoming external. The cows were thin. Maguire had told you this. But you hadn't understood what thin meant until you saw them. Ribs, hip bones, shoulder blades pressing through hides that should have been smooth and full. The hides of these animals were dull in a way you'd never seen on healthy cattle. Not the glossy coat of a well-fed animal, but something matte and slightly loose, like the animal inside was smaller than the skin containing it. Some of them had lesions on their sides, open sores where the hide had broken and wasn't healing, the edges pink and wet in the lamplight. And several of them had the look that Maguire would explain to you afterward. The look of an animal with milk fever or lung fever or some ailment that a veterinarian on a proper farm would have treated immediately. Here they were still milked. The spent grain came through the trough warm, steaming in winter, thick and heavy and sweet-smelling in a way that turned your stomach in this enclosed space. The cows ate it because they were hungry, because there was nothing else, because a cow in a basement has no choices about her diet. The milk they gave was thin and bluish. It looked wrong. Looked like something that wanted to apologize for itself. So it was corrected. Chalk powder, white as snow, ground fine and mixed in at the depot when a batch came in particularly thin, when the colour would raise too many questions from the doorways. A spoonful of calf's brain, obtained from the West Side slaughterhouses, available for almost nothing, a byproduct nobody else wanted, whipped and strained, and added in small amounts to give the milk a richness of texture that the distillery cows couldn't provide themselves. Occasionally a splash of molasses to give the colour a warmth that pure chalk water lacked, a suggestion of cream yellow, and always the water. The additional quarts per can, the volume expansion that increased the profit margin on each delivery, and ensured that 300 quarts could become 330 with some creativity and a bucket from the yard pump. You stood in that basement for maybe 5 minutes. Then you came back up the stairs, into the street, into the legitimate smell of a West Side industrial afternoon, and you took 3 deep breaths of air that smelled like coal smoke and horse traffic, and which felt clean by comparison. Now you know, Maguire said. He wasn't apologising, he wasn't warning you. He was simply stating the fact. Now you know. How long has this been going on, you asked? Long as I've been doing this. Long as anyone's been doing this. And nobody... There was a man, Frank Leslie, a newspaper man. 20 years ago he made a whole campaign about it. Swill milk, they called it. Articles, pictures, sketches of these exact dairies. The city got upset. Inspectors came around. A pause. And then Maguire shrugged. Nothing changed. The inspectors came around for a while. Then the newspapers found something else to be upset about. Then the inspectors stopped coming around. He looked at you with the expression he sometimes wore when explaining something he'd made peace with long ago. "You gonna stop delivering?" he asked. You didn't answer. "No," he said. "You're not. Because if you stop, someone else starts. And that someone else doesn't know which customers to watch, which cans to keep coldest, which stops need an extra minute because the mother there is sick or the baby there is struggling." He wasn't justifying, he was describing the system. "We're part of it," he said. "We didn't build it, but we're part of it." You walked back to the streetcar. You delivered milk the next morning, and the morning after. July in New York is a different city than any other month. The heat comes off the streets in waves you can see if you look along the cobblestones at a low angle. A shimmering liquid distortion that makes the far end of the block look like a mirage, like the street is in the process of dissolving into something else. The smell of the city in July is the summer smell, different from the winter smell, and entirely different from the almost fresh smell of spring. The summer smell is the smell of everything accelerated, everything decaying faster, everything fermenting, ripening, going over. The garbage in the gutters, and there is always garbage in the gutters, the sanitation of this city being an ongoing conversation between aspiration and reality, doesn't just smell, it generates its own microclimate of odour that you can feel on your face as you walk through it. A warm pressure. The horses, there are somewhere between 100 and 150,000 horses in New York City at this moment, produce approximately 1 million pounds of manure per day. In winter this is unpleasant. In July it is an achievement of a sort, a testament to the sheer volume of animal life moving through this island. The tenements have no real ventilation. The windows that open onto the airshaft open onto an airshaft that contains the accumulated exhalations and cooking smells and chamber pot emissions of 6 floors of families. Opening the window in July makes things worse. People sleep on their fire escapes, or on the rooftops, or simply don't sleep. And in July the milk situation becomes critical. Ice is expensive. The ice wagons come, but not reliably, and the blocks they deliver melt faster in July than any other month. The depots run short of ice. The improvised cooling, cool cellars, clay pots, the various adaptations that families use to keep food from going bad, are overwhelmed by the sustained heat. Milk that would last 8 hours in April lasts 4 hours in July. Milk that is already thin and diluted and contaminated, kept in cans that have been imperfectly cleaned, at temperatures that should be 35 or 40 degrees, but are actually 55 or 60, does something in July. It sours, it separates, it begins its transformation into something that a small body, a young body, a body without defences cannot handle. And the mothers who buy it don't know this. They're buying it at 4 in the morning when it's still cold from the night ice, and by the time the midday heat has done its work, they're feeding their babies something that has gone substantially past what any physician paying attention would call safe. The infant mortality rate in New York City in the summer of 1880 will kill approximately 1,400 children in the months of July through September. In the tenement neighbourhoods, the rate is higher. There is a word for it in the medical literature, infantile cholera, or summer complaint. The various clinical names that physicians give to something that is essentially bacillary dysentery combined with severe dehydration. A process that starts with the intestinal bacteria that breed in improperly handled milk, that progresses through fever and vomiting and diarrhea, that kills small bodies with a thoroughness and speed that is specific to small bodies. In the newspapers, when they mention it at all, they call it a product of poverty and the deficiencies of poor people's domestic management. The quality of tenement living leading inevitably to tenement children dying. Not the milk. Nobody talks about the milk. It's the 3rd week of July and the route has changed. Not officially. Not according to Sully's clipboard. The stops are the same. The quantities are the same. The coins change hands at the same doorways. But the feel of the route has changed. You notice it first at number 11. Mrs. Riley, who always takes her 2 quarts and makes a small comment about the weather, doesn't come to the door when you knock. Her husband comes. You've seen him twice in 6 months, a big quiet man who works the docks, and he takes the jug without speaking. Mrs. Riley all right, you ask. The little one's sick, he says. He closes the door. You stand on the landing for a moment. Then you go to the 3rd floor. The family with the teething baby. The father in his undershirt. He doesn't come to the door today. His wife does. She's been crying recently. You can tell from her eyes, the puffiness, the way she holds her face carefully. 6 quarts, you say, already opening the can. 4, she says. Marie's not... She stops. 4. Her daughter Marie is approximately 14 months old. You've seen her in the doorway on several mornings, dark-eyed and curious, pulling herself up against the doorframe to look at you and the cart with the same professional assessment as the baby at number 42. Is she... You start. The doctor came, the woman says. He said the summer heat. He said to keep her cool and give her boiled water. A pause. He said stop the milk. You look at her. She looks back at you. There is something in her expression that is not accusation, not quite, but that sits very close to it. The look of a woman who is trying to be fair about something that doesn't feel fair. The milk, you say. He said stop the milk, she repeats quietly. You pour 4 quarts. Take the money. Go back down the stairs. On the street, Caesar is waiting. The cart, the remaining cans cold and heavy. You stand next to the cart for a moment. The sun is fully up now, already hot, already beginning its work on the tin cans and on the city and on everything. Maguire comes around the corner from Hester, loading a return can. He glances at you. Moving, he says. Moving, you say. You pick up the next can. You meet him on a Wednesday, at a bench near the Croton Fountain in City Hall Park. You're taking the long way back to the depot, an extra 10 minutes, because City Hall Park has trees and shade and benches, and sometimes after the morning route your back wants 10 minutes of sitting before the afternoon starts. You're sitting, eating the stale bread from your pocket, watching pigeons conduct their investigations of the ground. The man sits down beside you. He's maybe 35, well-dressed, but in the way of a professional rather than a banker. Jacket that fits but isn't new, shoes that are good quality and slightly worn. He takes out a small notebook. You're a milkman, he says. Delivery man, you say. Same thing. He looks at the notebook. Do you mind if I mind, you say. He puts the notebook away. I'm writing about the milk trade, not to get you in trouble. I'm looking at the dairies, the processing. My name is Harper. It's not my real name. I don't know anything about the processing. He looks at you the way people look at you when they know you're lying and are deciding whether to push it. I've been looking at the infant death rates in the 6th ward, he says, conversational. Over the last 5 summers, the rates peak in July and August every year, sharply, and they peak hardest in the densest neighbourhoods, the ones with the most milk delivery routes. Poor people, you say. 1 in 20 babies born in those neighbourhoods dies before their first birthday from summer complaint alone. 1 in 20. He lets that sit. Dr. Abraham Jacobi has been writing about this for years, about boiling milk before giving it to infants, about the bacteria. Bacteria, you say, very small organisms that live in contaminated food, make people sick. New science. Most people don't know it yet, but some physicians do, and it explains what the mortality numbers show. You sit with this. If you know all this, you say, why hasn't anything changed? He is quiet for a long moment. That's what I'm trying to write, he says. He looks at you. Tell me about your depot, he says. You think about the chalk powder on the shelf in the back of Sully's depot, the bucket Egan carries, the cans from the distillery dairy, thin and bluish. You think about Marie on the 3rd floor of number 11. You think about Maguire's face when he said, "We didn't build it." I deliver milk, you say. I don't know what's in it. The man looks at you for a long time. All right, he says. He stands, puts the notebook away. The children who die from this, he says, looking down at you, not unkindly, don't have names in the reports. They're numbers. Infant mortality statistics. Cause. Summer complaint. Unknown etiology. And the families bury them in the Catholic cemeteries in Queens and come back and order another quart of milk the next morning because that's all they can do. He leaves. You sit with the pigeons for a while. Then you go back to the depot. The 4th week of July. You've made 340 deliveries since the start of the month. Marie from the 3rd floor has not been at the door since the morning her mother ordered 4 quarts instead of 6 at number 42. Mrs. Kirschenbaum, you've learned her name, now holds the baby on her other hip when she comes to the door. The baby that used to look at you with professional assessment. The baby is smaller than she was 3 weeks ago. This is not an impression. You can measure it objectively. The fat on her legs that used to crease at the knee in 2 deep dimples of healthy infant plumpness is less now. The baby is lighter on her mother's hip. The mother adjusts her position less because the weight demands it. You pour 2 quarts. Mrs. Kirschenbaum watches the milk go into her jug. The doctor says to boil it, she says, quietly. That's a good idea, you say. He says there may be things in the milk. Invisible things. That boiling kills. You look at her. She looks at you. Is that true? She asks. And this time the question doesn't have the careful indirectness of before. This time she's asking directly, in the way of a woman who has been watching her daughter lose weight for 3 weeks and has run out of indirect ways to ask. You are 17 years old. You deliver milk for a living. You make $6 a week, which is $3 more than you were making before this job, which is the difference between eating and not eating. If you tell this woman what you know, what happens? She stops buying. The family at number 11 stops buying. Mrs. Landau stops buying. The word spreads through the building the way words always spread through tenement buildings, and Sully loses customers, and Sully fires you, and you go back to being the boy from Cork with 32 cents and a wrong address. And the milk keeps being what it is, and Sully replaces you with someone who doesn't answer questions at doorways. Is that what happens? Or does something else? You don't know enough to know. Boil it, you say. Definitely boil it. It is not nothing. It is not everything. It is what you can say, standing at this door with this jug and these 2 quarts. She nods and closes the door, and you go back to the cart. It happens on a Thursday. You're on the 5th stop of the morning, first floor apartment, elderly man, 1 quart, when you come down the stoop and see them. 2 men standing at the cart, looking at the cans. Dark blue vests with a small badge at the breast pocket. The manner of men conducting official business, purposeful but unhurried, with the particular stillness of people who have authority and know it, and don't need to demonstrate it. Milk inspectors. New York City had authorized inspectors. Not many, not well funded, not consistently deployed. The dairy interests had seen to that over years of quiet legislative work. But present sometimes. Present the way of things that are supposed to be happening but mostly aren't, surfacing occasionally to prove they exist. This is one of the times they're actually happening. Maguire is on the other side of the cart. His body has changed, not obviously, not in any way a stranger would see, but you know Maguire, and you can see the slight stiffening, the arrangement of his features into the expression of a man with nothing to hide. "These your cans?" one of the inspectors asks. "Our route, yes, sir," Maguire says. "Who's your depot?" "Sullivan, Thomas Sullivan, Centre Street." "We're going to need samples." "Of course." The inspector opens a can, takes out a small glass bottle with a cork, dips it into the milk. You watch from the stoop. The milk in the bottle is white, very white. The chalk-corrected white of a can that was particularly thin this morning. You'd noticed it when loading, the bluish tinge before, though you can't be certain. You never saw Egan work this morning. You only noticed the colour. The inspector holds the bottle up to the early morning light, looks at the colour, looks at the consistency, writes something in his log, moves to the next can. You come down the stoop, stand beside Maguire. "Third inspection this summer," Maguire murmurs, low enough that only you hear. "What happens?" you murmur back. "They take the samples to the lab. Specific gravity tests. Water content. Looking for chalk. Adulterants. And if they find what they find. Sully pays a fine, not a large fine. A fine that is considerably less than the profit on watered milk for a month. He says this without inflection, without bitterness, just the facts of the system. The inspector moves to the 3rd can, 4th, 5th. At the 7th can he pauses, dips his finger into the milk, which is probably outside the protocol, and tastes it. His expression doesn't change. He makes another note. "Names," he says. "Maguire, Patrick Maguire. Thomas Brennan," he writes them down. "You'll likely hear from the office. Nothing to worry about if your operation is clean." "Completely clean," Maguire says. The inspector looks at him. Not the look of a man who believes what he's hearing. The look of a man who is within a system that requires him to accept it. "Good day," he says, and they leave. You stand beside the cart. Caesar has watched the whole exchange with the equanimity of an animal that has learned to be unmoved by human drama. "Nothing will happen," Maguire says. "To us or to Sully?" "To anyone." He picks up a can. "Come on." This part is harder to tell. Not because it's complicated, because it's simple. The simplest things are always the hardest. On a Friday morning in the last week of July, you arrive at number 42 on Orchard Street, and Mrs. Kirschenbaum does not come to the door. You knock. Wait. There are sounds from inside, voices, movement, but not the movement of someone coming to answer. You knock again. The door opens a few inches, not Mrs. Kirschenbaum. Her husband, a tailor. Small, precise hands, the slightly forward lean of a man who works bent over a table. He looks at you, We won't need milk today, he says. His voice is the voice of a man holding many things very carefully. You look at the door, the gap. Is everything, you start. We won't need milk today, he says again, and closes the door. You stand on the landing. From behind the door, the sound of a woman crying, not loud. The particular sound of someone trying to cry quietly, trying not to be heard, which somehow makes it worse. The effort of containing grief, the effort of keeping it to a private size. The baby. You think of the baby on Mrs. Kirschenbaum's hip, the professional assessing look, the dimples at her knees that have been fading for 3 weeks. You think of the doctor who told her to boil the milk. You think of what you said. I'd boil it. To be safe. Not, there is chalk in this milk. Not, the cows that made this were sick. Not, the man I watched pouring water from a bucket into a receiving can is named Egan and works at the Sullivan Depot on Centre Street. You said, I'd boil it. You stand on the landing of number 42, Orchard Street, New York City, July 1880, with an empty can in your hand and the sound of grief coming through a closed door. The building breathes around you. The dozens of families on their dozens of floors living their compressed lives. Down on the street, Caesar waits, the cart, the remaining cans, cold from the morning ice. You go down, you pick up the next can, you go to the next stop. That evening, the route is done, the cans returned, the coins counted and handed to Sully, who enters them in his ledger with methodical care. You and Maguire sit on the back step of the depot in the small yard while the evening comes down over the city. The heat is still substantial. July evenings don't cool much, but the direct sun is gone, and that is something. Maguire has bread and a piece of cheese which he eats with the same focused efficiency he brings to everything. You have nothing. You forgot to buy bread this morning. This happens on bad days. The Kirschenbaum baby, you say, Maguire chews. You heard. I was at the door, he nods. He doesn't look at you. How old, he asks. 10 months, maybe 11. He chews, swallows. A lot of them this summer, he says. I know. More than usual, even. You look at the evening light on the dirty yellow brick of the building across the yard, going warm orange in the dying sun. Maguire, you say. No, he says. I haven't said anything yet. You're going to ask me if we're responsible. He picks up another piece of bread, and the answer is yes and no and neither. That's not an answer. It's the only answer there is. He doesn't look at you. If we stop delivering, those families buy from someone else. Someone with milk that's the same or worse. We stop delivering. Those families don't get cleaner milk. They get Devlin's at a penny more per quart, which means they buy less of it, which means their children are hungry. We stop delivering. Sully hires 2 boys from the Bowery who don't know the route and don't know the customers and don't know which families need watching. That's what you tell yourself. You say. He turns to look at you. That's what is true, he says evenly. I've been doing this 16 years. Before me there were men doing this route. Before them, other men. The milk was the same then. The babies were the same. It will be the same after you're gone. It doesn't have to be. No, he says. It doesn't have to be. A long pause. A cart moves on the street outside. Caesar, stabled for the night somewhere nearby, is silent. There was a man, Maguire says, before the war, wrote a whole book about this. Robert Hartley went and looked at the distillery dairies himself, wrote every detail down. People were upset for a while. What happened? He died. Other people wrote other things. The city grew. More people came. More babies, more milk needed. He looks at the wall. The man with the notebook, you say. Maguire looks at you sharply. What man? A journalist. Goes by Harper. He's writing about the mortality rates in the 6th ward. He knows about the milk. Maguire is quiet. What did you tell him? Nothing. Good. But Maguire, what are you going to tell him, Thomas? What specifically? His voice is not angry, almost gentle. That Egan adds water to the receiving cans. Egan gets fired, someone else hired, operation continues, that the milk comes from distillery dairies. They'll print an article. City will get upset for a few weeks. Then they'll stop being upset. You're saying nothing changes. I'm saying nothing has changed in the 20 years I know about, possibly longer. You think about the closed door on Orchard Street. Then what do we do, you ask? He finishes his bread. We do our jobs, he says. We know which customers need watching. We know which cans to keep coldest. We know when to tell a mother to boil the milk. That's not enough. No, he says, it isn't. He stands, brushes crumbs from his enormous hands. But it's what we have. He goes inside. You sit on the step for a while. The evening sounds of the city move around you. You find Harper 2 days later. He left a note with a boy at the depot. The coffee house on Park Row is a working journalist's place. Dark, utilitarian, smelling of newsprint and tobacco and the accumulated argument of men who make their living from words. Every table has papers on it. Every face has the look of someone composing something in their head while pretending to do something else. Harper's in the corner. He has papers spread out. He looks like a man who has been here for several hours and expects to be here several more. You came, he says. I came. The coffee costs 2 cents. You don't have 2 cents to spare this morning. The waitress looks at you, and you shake your head, and she moves on without comment. Harper slides his own cup toward you. Tell me what you know, he says, not for publication, just to confirm. You think about the closed door on Orchard Street. You tell him, not everything, not Egan's name, but the what, the watering, the chalk, the calf's brains, the distillery dairy on West 16th Street, the cows in the underground stalls. Harper doesn't write while you speak. He listens. The specific gravity tests, he says, when you're done. When the inspectors sample the cans, what's the procedure? They take a bottle from the can, write something down, that's all I see. And the cans that test too low in specific gravity, meaning too much water, what happens to Sully? A fine. Maguire says the fine is less than the profit from a month of watered milk. Harper nods. He's heard this from other people, you can tell. What I'm writing, he says, is about the system, not individual men. Sully and Egan are replaceable parts of a structure. What I'm writing about is the structure. Will it change anything? He looks at his papers. Probably not immediately, he says. Maybe eventually. There's a man in Boston, a physician named Henry Bowditch, who's been pushing for pasteurization legislation, heating milk to a temperature that kills the bacteria before sale. Bacteria again, the invisible organisms. The dairy interests fight it, says. They fight any regulation. They fight inspection. They fight pasteurization. They say it's unnecessary, expensive, an intrusion on private commerce. They have representatives on the Board of Health. And the babies, you say. The babies don't have a lobby, Harper says. The babies don't have money or connections. He gathers his papers. But the story exists, he says. And stories sometimes? He doesn't finish the sentence. You both know how often stories change things. You both know how often they don't. You deliver milk the next morning. You deliver milk the morning after. The months will eventually turn. It's still July, but July ends. August comes and is brutal and also ends. September brings a slight cooling that feels like an act of mercy after the furnace. The infant mortality rate drops in September. Every year it drops in September. The summer complaint recedes. The doctors mark their ledgers. The tenement mothers breathe easier. The newspapers, if they mention the summer deaths at all, have already moved on to other things. The dairies keep operating. The carts keep rolling through the pre-dawn dark. In October, Sully hires a new delivery man. 16, red-haired, freckled, arrived 6 weeks ago from Sligo, finds everything about New York overwhelming and fascinating in equal measure, hasn't yet learned to protect himself from either. His name is Patrick Gallagher. Sully assigns him to your route. Show him the stops, Sully says. First morning Gallagher is slow on the stairs. His arms aren't built for the cans yet. His hands grip wrong and he's going to have blisters by the end of the week. Here, you say, at the bottom of the staircase at number 11. You show him the grip, the way to redistribute the pressure. Like this. Otherwise your palm splits open and stays split all winter, he tries it. Better, better, he says. At Mrs. Riley's door, second floor. Always knock twice, she's a little deaf, and she asks if it'll keep. You say yes, in a cool place. Will it keep? You look at him. Say yes, you say, and keep it in a cool place. At number 42, a different family now. The Kirschenbaums moved in August. You don't know where. Gallagher looks at the door with no particular knowledge of what happened there. Good. He doesn't need to know yet. 2 quarts, you say. Standard. On the next block, a mother with an infant in arms. You fill her jug. While you're measuring, without looking up from the dipper, you say, if you have a baby, boil this before you give it to them. I say it to everyone. Good practice in summer and winter both. She looks at you. The milkman says to boil it, she says. Yes, ma'am. She takes her jug. She's going to boil it. You can tell from the way she looks at it on the way back inside. Behind you, Gallagher watches. Why do you say that? He asks when you're back at the cart. You pick up the next can. 22 pounds. Your back knows the weight the way a familiar road knows a cartwheel. Because it's good practice, you say. But why? Because it's good practice, you say again. Come on. It's September now, and the heat has broken. On a Sunday afternoon, with the route done and no afternoon work, you climb. The tenement staircase at number 11 has a door at the top, and that door has a lock that broke months ago and hasn't been fixed, and beyond it is the roof. The door opens with its familiar scrape of swollen wood. A Manhattan opens up. From the roof of a 6-story tenement on Mulberry Street, on a clear September afternoon in 1880, you can see in every direction. To the north, the city climbing its grid, block after block of rooftops and chimneys, and the wooden water towers that sit on top of buildings like enormous barrels, extending until it blurs into haze somewhere above 14th Street. Uptown, the areas where people with money live, where the streets are wider and the buildings set back and the air tastes marginally different, as though even the air has better arrangements. To the west, you can't see the Hudson River from here, too many buildings, but you can see the light scatter and smoke that marks the industrial waterfront, the docks, the ships. To the east, 5 blocks, the East River. Actually visible from here, a shimmer of water between buildings, The Brooklyn shore beyond it, and rising above the Brooklyn shore, the towers, the Brooklyn Bridge. They've been building it for 8 years. It will take 3 more years to finish. Right now, in September 1880, the towers on both sides of the river are complete. Massive stone Gothic arches rising 276 feet above the water, taller than everything around them, slightly otherworldly looking, as if they belong to a different city than the one they're standing in. The cables are being strung between them now, the enormous wire ropes that will eventually support the roadway. You can see the towers from here, not clearly but present. 2 stone shapes on either side of the East River, lit in the afternoon sun. They've been building this since 1869. 11 years of labour, of engineering, of men working on the tops of those towers in open wind, and men working in the pneumatic caissons deep in the riverbed where the compressed air pressure caused the mysterious illness, the bends that killed men who came up too fast. The chief engineer, John Roebling, died before construction properly began. His foot was crushed on the ferry dock, tetanus set in. His son Washington Roebling took over and was himself incapacitated by the bends, left to direct construction from his apartment window with a telescope. His wife Emily carrying his instructions to the site each day. His wife Emily has been overseeing much of the engineering for years. The first bridge across the East River, the longest suspension bridge in the world when it's finished. The men who drove the first caissons for this bridge were alive when your father was born. It's that recent, that real. From this rooftop you can see the beginning of what the bridge will become. Behind you the sounds of Mulberry Street, the constant low roar of 500,000 people living their lives simultaneously, the accumulated noise of a city that doesn't stop. Below you, the building that contains Mrs. Riley with her 2 quarts, and the family on the 3rd floor where Marie is, as far as you know, slowly recovering. The new families who have moved into number 42. In your coat pocket, the bread from the bakery. Your hands are cracked at the knuckles. Your back carries the permanent slight ache of 6 months of early mornings and heavy cans. Your boots are worn at the left heel where you favour your right side when lifting. You're 17 years old from County Cork, and you're standing on a rooftop in the largest city in North America, looking at a bridge that isn't finished yet. The bridge will be finished in 1883. By then you'll be 19, still delivering milk probably, or maybe something else. The city doesn't tell you what comes next. It just sits there, vast, indifferent, full of all its terrible and remarkable life, and lets you figure it out. You eat your bread standing up, looking at the towers. There is a man at the depot named Caruso, which is not his name. It was given to him as a joke by someone whose logic you've never fully followed. His real name is James Horan. He's from Dublin. He's 51 years old and has worked the milk trade for 23 years. He drives the large supply wagon, not the route carts, the overnight delivery from the outlying depots to the central distribution point. 6 heavy horses, the work of moving several thousand quarts of milk from outside the city to inside it. His body has the look of a tree that has grown in one place for a long time, dense, settled, shaped by the work. One Tuesday morning he stops you at the depot while you're loading. "You're Brennan," he says. "Yes." "Sully says you tell the mothers to boil the milk." You wait. He's not happy about it. "I know." He thinks you're spooking the customers. "I know." Caruso looks at you with eyes that have the quality of eyes that have seen many things and have stopped being surprised by new ones. "Keep doing it anyway," he says. You look at him. I know what's in those cans, he says. I know what's in every can in this city. I've been moving milk for 23 years. A pause. My wife's mother lost 3 children before their first birthday. This was before I understood what I was moving, before I put it together. He says this without drama, the tone of a fact. After I put it together, I thought about leaving, finding other work. Why didn't you? Because I thought, if I leave, someone else drives this wagon, someone who doesn't know, and at least I know, at least I can do. He makes a gesture that encompasses the route, the cans, the city, everything. Small things, you say. Small things. He nods. You told Harper about the distillery dairy. You're very still. I know you did, he says. Harper came to me too. I told him more than you did, most likely. Sully doesn't know, and Harper's careful. He looks down the street. The story he writes, it'll be read by 300 people who already knew, and maybe 5 people who didn't, and who will do something with that knowledge. Maybe. That's not much. No, but it's not nothing. He looks at you. You're 17. Yes. When you're 27, the milk will be better than it is now. When you're 37, better still. Not because of any one person, because of the accumulation of small things. Mothers who boil the milk, reporters who write the stories, physicians who keep pushing, aldermen who occasionally actually read the aldermanic reports. He picks up his coat from the depot wall. This city eats people, he says. You know that. It took your time and your health and your naivety about what work means and left you with... He gestures at your worn boots, your cracked hands. Whatever this is, you agree. But it hasn't taken your conscience yet, he says. Don't let it. He goes to his wagon. You load your cans. The story runs in November in one of the smaller reform papers. Not a major publication. The major papers have interest to protect, advertisers to consider. The kind of paper that gets passed hand to hand in certain circles and read carefully by certain physicians and aldermen and largely ignored by everyone else. You read it in a coffee house near the depot, over 2 cents of coffee that you nurse for 30 minutes. Harper's story is careful, documented. It names the system without naming individual workers, except Sully, who gets named. One of several depot operators characterized as operating outside the 1864 inspection guidelines. The story talks about distillery dairies, about specific gravity testing and the gap between results and consequences, about the infant mortality rates in the 6th ward, about a woman, unnamed, neighbourhood given only as the Lower East Side, whose doctor told her to boil the milk and whose infant recovered. You assume that's Mrs. Kirschenbaum. You hope that's Mrs. Kirschenbaum. The story mentions briefly in its last section that there are delivery men who, operating within a flawed system, attempt to minimize harm through informal means. Small acts of conscience within a structure that discourages conscience. That might be you, or it might be Maguire, or Caruso, or any of the dozens of men on dozens of routes who tell mothers to boil the milk without explaining why, who keep cans in the coldest part of the cart, who stand for a moment at a closed door and hear what's behind it. You fold the paper, leave it on the table for the next person, go back to the depot. The cold comes in earnest now. You wake at 3 in the morning, and the water in the basin has a skin of ice on it. You break it with your fist the way you will every winter morning. The same gesture, the same shock of cold water on your face, the body's protest at being asked to begin again. Your fingers are cracking worse than they were in summer. Cold and wet metal and cold, dry air. Your skin has no defense against all three simultaneously. You wrap the worst cracks with cloth strips before you put on your coat. The route in winter is harder and also easier. Harder because of the cold. Because Caesar slips on ice-glazed cobblestones and you walk at his head on bad mornings, one hand on his bridle, guiding him around the worst patches. Because your breath fogs in the stairwells and the stairs are frozen in ways that change daily and require attention to avoid becoming a problem. Easier because the milk stays cold. Because the heat that turned everything dangerous in July is gone, replaced by temperatures that keep the cans properly cold for the entire route without any assistance from the increasingly inadequate ice supply. In November, the milk is what it should have been in July, cold at least, cold and moving fast. You think about this sometimes. The milk trade is not scientifically complicated. It needs cold. It needs clean containers. It needs to come from healthy animals kept in decent conditions. These are not radical requirements. They are simply requirements that cost money that Sully and operations like Sully's do not want to spend. Simpler than that. The milk needs to not have water added to it. Needs to not have chalk added. Needs to come from cows fed grass, not distillery mash, not complicated, just expensive in a system that profits from not doing those things. The boarding house where you've been living since October, a slightly nicer room than Mulberry Street with a real window, is run by Mrs. Callahan from Limerick, who makes supper every evening for her 6 boarders. Tonight, salt pork with boiled potatoes and dense bread. Small beer, which in November you drink for warmth as much as anything else. The 6 boarders are you, a printer's assistant named Kearns who talks about nothing but labour organising, a young woman named Agnes who works in a shirt factory and reads novels at the table when Mrs. Callahan isn't watching, an older man named Feigenbaum whose trade you've never determined, a boy from Donegal named Sullivan who works the docks, and occasionally a musician named Colum who plays fiddle at neighbourhood dances. Tonight all 6. The conversation covers Irish politics, the progress of the Brooklyn Bridge, the price of coal. Agnes, without looking up from her novel, says, "There was a piece in the paper about the milk." Silence. "What milk?" Kern says. "The carts, the deliveries, about the dairies." She turns a page. "About what they put in it." "I read that," Feigenbaum says. "The Hutchinson paper. Harper, you say. Everyone looks at you. The journalist, you say. His name is Harper." Agnes closes her book on her finger. "You know him? I met him. It was quite specific," she says. "About the distillery dairies. The chalk." A pause. "I've been boiling my milk since I read it." "That's sensible," you say. "The factory girls were talking about it, whether to stop buying milk altogether." "Boiling is better than stopping," you say. "You need the nutrition." She looks at you. "You deliver milk," she says. "Yes." "Is it true, what the article said?" The supper table is quiet. Mrs. Callahan is in the kitchen. The fire in the parlour is going, and you can feel its warmth from here. "Boil it," you say. "Definitely boil it." Agnes looks at you for a moment, then opens her book. "I will," she says. Later that evening you sit by the window in your room. A real window, 2 panes facing east. On clear days you can see, if you lean out, a slice of sky between the buildings that shows you a star or 2. Tonight it shows you the gas lamp on the corner and the rooftops beyond, and further away the darkness of the East River, and beyond that the lights of Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Bridge towers are lit at night by electric arc lamps during construction. You can see them from this angle. Just the very tops, the Gothic arches, lit against the night sky, still being built. 14 months since you arrived in this city. You know things now that you didn't know then. You know that New York City contains all of its contradictions simultaneously, without resolving any of them. Beauty and ugliness in the same block, commerce and corruption in the same system, people trying and people giving up and people building bridges and people selling bad milk and people writing stories about the bad milk and people boiling their milk because of the stories. You know that the city is not your friend and not your enemy. It doesn't know you exist. It simply is, vast and indifferent and always moving, always generating new lives as new problems and new opportunities in the same churning process, the same relentless engine. You know that your hands are cracked and your back aches, and you're 17 years old and you have been in America for 14 months, and you have $6.30 in a tin box under your bed, which is more money than you have ever had at one time in your life. You know that there is a morning coming at 3 o'clock. You know that Caesar will be at the end of the street waiting, because Caesar is always at the end of the street waiting. You know that Mrs. Riley will be at her door when you knock, or her husband will be, and the number of quarts they order tells you something about how the household is doing that morning. You know that the Brooklyn Bridge is going to be finished in 1883, and that when it is finished you will be 19 years old and living in this city, and you will probably cross it on the first public day. You know that somewhere, in a reform paper that probably 300 people have read, there is a story with your actions in it, unnamed, attributed to no specific person, described as a small act of conscience within a structure that discourages conscience. These are the things you know. Outside the window, New York is doing what New York does. Someone down the street is arguing. Not violently, just raised voices over something practical. The argument peaks, decreases, stops. From further away, the sound of a fiddle. Column probably at one of the dance halls. Or someone like Column. There are many fiddles in this city, many columns. The clop of a horse somewhere, late delivery, or just the city's ordinary nighttime movement. Your candle is burning down. You should sleep. 3 o'clock comes whether you're ready or not. The candle gutters. The room goes dark except for the window, and the window shows you the gas lamp on the corner and the slice of Brooklyn sky, and, just visible at the edge of the frame, the lit tops of the bridge towers. Still being built, everything still being built, you lie back. The mattress is your mattress now. You've been here long enough that it's shaped to you, that you know its every complaint and which direction to lie to avoid the worst of them. Your hands rest at your sides. You can feel the cracks at the knuckles. Small, familiar pain. The body's accounting of the day, the work, the 6 months of early mornings. Your back has settled into the mattress. The grinding between the shoulder blades that follows the morning cans has released finally after hours of ordinary posture. You're warm, warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. The sounds of the city come through the window, softer now. A cart somewhere. Horses' hooves on cobblestone. A church bell marking the hour. How many church bells are there in this city? Hundreds. Each one marking the same moment from different towers, the same hour arriving differently for different people. You think about all the other people in this city who are, at this moment, also lying down, also in the dark, also in rooms that are too small and buildings that are too full. The milk deliveryman 2 buildings over, whose route you pass and whose nod you exchange but whose name you don't know. The laundress in the airshaft building whose singing you sometimes hear. The bakery man on Delancey whose bread is the best smell in this city at any hour. Mrs. Riley, hair down, probably still awake with the little one. Marie from the third floor, who is, you hope, growing back toward the window, back toward curiosity, back toward the doorway. Maguire, in his own room somewhere, hands curved around the phantom shape of a can handle even in sleep, and the babies, all the babies, the ones who made it through the summer, the ones who didn't, whose names are not in any report you can access, who are the unnumbered, the infants who died before the records caught up to the problem, the ones being born right now, tonight, in rooms not far from where you lie, entering the city that will test them the way it tests everything. You close your eyes. The route runs through your half-sleeping mind. The stops in order. Number 11, number 14, number 20. The orchard block. Mrs. Petrovska and her 4 flights of stairs and her dignified refusal to acknowledge your effort. The Hester extension. Caesar's patient step. The cans clinking in the pre-dawn dark, the specific weight of a full can in your left hand, the cold of the metal biting into your palm, the sound of the milk moving inside when you tip the can, the sound that tells you its consistency, its truth, before you've measured a single quart. Mrs. Kirschenbaum's face when she asked, "Is there something wrong with the milk?" And the answer you gave, "I'd boil it. To be safe. Not enough. Not nothing." The bridge towers, just visible through the window, lit against the night. Still being built. 3 more years. The city around you breathes. 500,000 people, breathing in the dark, and somewhere underneath all of it, underneath the gas lamps and the horse carts and the tenements and the distillery dairies and the inspectors and the chalk powder and the tin cans and the morning routes, the milk moves through the city. The same milk that moved through this city before you arrived. The same milk that will move through it after you're gone. But perhaps a little less chalk. Perhaps a little more boiling. Perhaps small things. Sleep takes you the way it always takes you, not suddenly but in layers. First, the sounds of the city softening, not going away but losing their edges, losing their urgency, becoming texture instead of meaning. Then the thoughts slowing, the route, the stops, the faces at the doors, they lose their sequence and drift. Then the weight of the day settling through you like something warm, something earned. You worked today. You'll work tomorrow. You told them to boil it. It's not enough, but it's what you have. It's what you have right now in this room, in this city, in this year, in these cracked hands and this tired body. And tired sometimes is a kind of richness when it comes from work that was real. Let the sounds go quiet. Let the bells finish their counting. Let the carts roll on without you for a few hours. Let the city do what the city does, all its churning and its motion, and its terrible, beautiful, indifferent industry, while you rest. You've earned this. Take it. Centuries will pass. The tenements on Mulberry Street will be torn down. The distillery dairies will be shut. Not for a long time, but eventually. In 1893, Nathan Strauss will open his first pasteurized milk stations for infants in New York. In 1897, city ordinances will require dairy inspection. In 1906, the Pure Food and Drug Act will pass at the federal level. Slowly. Very slowly. The Brooklyn Bridge will be finished in 1883, and then it will be 100 years old, and then celebrated, and people who have never thought about Washington Roebling in his apartment, with his telescope, or his wife Emily carrying his instructions to the workers each day, will walk across it and take photographs, and feel proud of something they had nothing to do with. The milk will be pasteurized, required by law, every bottle labelled with its source and testing dates, kept in refrigerated trucks that would be incomprehensible to you, sold in stores lit by electric light. The infant mortality rate will fall, not to zero, but fall. The babies in the photographs at the Nathan Strauss milk stations, healthy, named, living. They are the consequence of people who couldn't stop the system, but did the small things in front of them. The mothers who boiled the milk, the reporters who wrote the stories, the physicians who kept pushing, the delivery men who said, "I'd boil it," to be safe. That's all there ever is. The small things, accumulated. The same city will still be here. Different buildings, different names, but the same river, the same grid of streets, the same people trying to get through their days, still needing what they need, still trusting that what is handed to them through doorways in the early morning is what it claims to be. Some things don't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day doesn't change. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Thomas Brennan in his room above Mulberry Street, 146 years ago. Let the world fade, let the noise quiet. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. The bridge is being built. The milk is moving through the city. The morning will come, but not yet. Not yet. Good night.